Psych. Hold on, I'm really disoriented right now because number one, you can see my green screen is not up. Number two, I think this is the first stream we've done on this side of the room, or at least without the green screen. And number three, my green screen is not up. So I have to do the little sound check thing here. Looks like everything is as it's supposed to be. Okay, so we're going to work over here for now, right? I want to make sure the stream is live and make sure I'm actually talking into the microphone so y'all can hear me. That looks good. Okay, so we had a real serious internet problem. This is going to be a short stream today. We're not going to do the music. The internet was sort of down. You can see what sort of down means. So most of these services, if you've seen this dashboard before, you know most of these services are down because we're still transition. This is the new cluster, same as the old cluster, except it's not on that wall anymore. It's on this one. And this is the service we use to track our uptime, which is doing pretty well since last night. All right. We're just going to look at the DNS dashboard. You can see we have a lot less queries than we used to have. This number was way over 1 million. And I didn't really know that that was a high amount of queries until I learned how to read the statistics. So we're just going to look in my bookmarks real quick here. Hello, Fiona. We're going to look at the things I found and learned. What is that? New folder up there. No, we want this one. There we go. New Cozy Stack release. Definitely check it out. Okay, so I'm not even sure where to begin on this, but we're going to make it quick. I'm just going to show you try to narrate, I guess, what debugging steps I went through. Oh, we're starting to drop frames. Encoding overloaded. I can't open all these tabs at once. This is going to be a disaster. Maybe we can get just a few more. You know what else? We're also on bad screen here. We need to be on good screen or we're going to have a bad time. By bad screen, good screen, I mean I have this, I don't even know what to call it, display link adapter, I think, to add another screen, and it works great, except it is a little bit sluggish and can only do, basically can only do 30 hertz. But it works great compared to only having one external screen. Okay. So the bottom line is, I had a chatty querier. I've told the story in a little bit more detail on the Cozy Stack Telegram. So if you are in the Cozy Stack community, you can read the narrated version there. It's a little bit more focused on the problems I'm having scaling up Cozy Stack to many virtual machine clusters. But basically my goal is, I want to be able to do experiments inside of a virtual machine cluster. So I know, number one, that they're reliable, and number two, so I can credibly share my experience with customers. And by customers, I mean sort of there's a couple of lines for me. So if you have a Kubernetes cluster, you already know why you need that. You know you need a Kubernetes cluster. If you don't accidentally step into a Kubernetes cluster, in my experience. It's kind of a lift to get a Kubernetes cluster into production. I don't really have great lighting here. I'm sorry about that. But then when you realize you can run virtual machines on Kubernetes, the next natural step that you would think to try, hopefully, is to run a Kubernetes cluster on your Kubernetes cluster, maybe even more than one. So we talk about observability sometimes. One thing that I think you need to be able to do is to understand when something's wrong. And I'm telling this story because I did not really understand that millions of queries was abnormal at all. So I was completely taken by surprise when I realized that the queries being logged, millions of queries, could actually take down my DNS server. So my DNS server is a Pi-hole. We're going to SSH in to, do you SSH into this? I don't think so because it's on, well, it's not on Kubernetes. It is a Synology machine here. It's this guy back here. So I need to SSH there. We have an SSH key. And we can see we're running a couple of Docker containers, and then this Pi-hole one is the one we're interested in. And I have a bash binary in there, so I can shell in and do pretty much whatever I want. And what I want to do is look at the commands I ran yesterday. So there were a few commands I ran. Let's look at the Docker Pi-hole. Let's see. So the problem that I was having was an error message that I put in the show notes. Hopefully the show notes are still here somewhere. Still here somewhere. Still here somewhere. Just want to make sure we actually have audio. Just want to make sure we actually have audio. Just want to make sure we actually have audio. Ooh, it's pretty low. Just want to make sure we actually have audio. Ooh, it's pretty low. Well, I guess it's okay. All right, so long story short, a SQLite file grew to 2 gigabytes in size. And that SQLite file loading in memory was short-circuiting the container. It was either going completely out of memory, which I think is what was happening, probably due to a memory limit, or it was overfilling the shared memory or something. I wasn't really sure because the, like I said, we were going to see in the show notes. This is really the only trace I found at first. I was looking at the logs because I knew there was something wrong with the DNS. I was only getting intermittent responses to my queries. I thought it was dependent on which subnet I was coming in from. Like if I did a query from the 13 net, then it would surely crash the DNS server. But if I did a query from the 12 net, then it would work okay until a few seconds later. Then it wouldn't work anymore. But then it would come back. So it's just cycling the process, and it's briefly able to serve, but as soon as it gets to a certain threshold of loading this FTL database file, and again, I don't know why it's loading the query log, I guess in order to push more queries into it, then it would lock up and restart the process. So I did eventually find this 2 gigabytes file, and I realized that was probably the problem. And I figured out how to cut the number of queries down through Googling. I think it was one of these Stack Overflow windows I've got open. But then it hit me like this file is not supposed to fill up. They tuned these limits correctly, I assume. Like for a year, it should be able to hold a year worth of queries in the query logs. Otherwise, they would have set that limit lower by default. So I found another page where they explain exactly how you can see who is doing what. So these numbers have gone down by a lot. DNS queries today is actually under 200,000 now, and it's going to go down even further when that hump clears at the beginning of our so there were 2 separate issues. Another red flag I saw was something about running out of 64 megabytes of memory, and the only thing that I could find that was 64 megabytes was this SHM file, and it was up to 99%, and I thought that might be wrong. It might actually be okay, but it was popping up in the diagnostic logs too. So I found that might be related to it's called, there was a common reason why you get this file fills up, and it's because you have turned on a feature called, maybe we'll just find it in the UI. That's not what it's called. Sorry, we're still on bad screen. We're almost finished. It's okay. Conditional forwarding. Yes, conditional forwarding is the trick that allows queries for only turkey.local to be forwarded to the turkey.local DNS server, which is really not correct, I think. This is not really the DNS server anymore. It's the router, this guy up here. But that's where all of the IP reservations are kept. So at least on the 12 net. On the 13 net, they are kept on. Well, this router over here doesn't do DHCP. DHCP is turned off. We're using DNS mask and Matchbox on that subnet to netboot all of these machines. So so that we can nuke their hard drives and bring them back online most of the time. And that works most of the time. It works pretty well. I think. Anyway, so that's the cool thing that I learned. We're still on bad screen here. That's what I wanted to share with you today. And also, we're getting a new doggy. And that's why I have to leave so soon, because we have to go pick him up, and he's all the way across the state. All the way downstate in South Indianapolis. So we're going to go pick up Boris, and hopefully the next time you see me, we can meet him. Oh, so what did I find by inspecting the query logs? Well, I found one machine in particular was soaking up most of the queries. They're a little bit more balanced now. And it was querying most of all control 0. What's control 0? Do you guys remember when I created that KubeADM cluster out of virtual machines, artisanally crafted Debian, I'm sorry, they were Ubuntu Linux machines with kubeadm and containerd installed by hand, configured according to the kubeadm installation docs? Yes, I remember that. That was the first cluster I built on Cozy Stack. And I sort of forgot that it was running when I transitioned all of my workloads over to the new KubeVirt Kamaji cluster. We have a couple of those. So anyway, what was happening, what I found out was that wherever this machine was running, or whenever it was not running, the workers that were trying to reach it and couldn't reach it kept over and over again trying to query this domain name. And it was failing, or it was succeeding, whatever, it was being logged. Millions of times, millions of times. Why did they query over and over again? I don't know. Maybe I mean, it succeeds from here. Can't really tell. But they kept trying, and it overflowed the logs. Millions of queries, like over 1 million queries per day. It was up to 43 million queries in the log. And I think that was the limit, how many it could take. So not a full year of data. If it had been able to go for a full year, it would have been probably 10 gigabytes. So as soon as I shut down all of those machines, this number stopped going up, and that line went flat, like this. See, I think since we started our stream here, we're experiencing an abnormally high number of queries again, but not as high as before. And this only goes back 24 hours, which is the reason why I really wanted to have this stream before I go today, because we won't be able to look at this graph tomorrow, or we'll be able to look at it, but it won't look like this anymore. As this drops down to something like probably 75,000 queries per day. I think that's a reasonable number to expect this to look like based on that. Well, maybe 200,000 queries per day. We're almost there. Oh, we are below 200,000. So this number probably isn't going to get much lower. I'm going to say 175,000. That's probably where it's going to settle. Okay. So that's pretty much it. So I did not have to disable conditional forwarding in the end. It's still on. I did increase the shared memory size. But if you look, it is actually not going over 64 megs. It just hangs out around there. So maybe 64 megs is really tuned value. Maybe this number will go down after that peak is down. I am just going to close these tabs one by one, and then we'll call the stream. We are going to have music here. Goodbye.